Mr. Arunjit Chaudhary is the CEO at Enterprise Building Training Solutions. He has wide experience of 25 plus years in IT industry for tier 1 clients across US, Europe, and Asia Pacific. He has proven ability in managing, building, implementing complex enterprise level programs or projects. He has managed team size of 174 FTEs as key delivery manager for a large cement manufacturing company. And he has also contributed in increment revenue from US dollar 10.5 million to 11.5 million and profitability from 7.4% to 11% in course of 1 year only. He has global attrition and it was limited to 5%. He was nominated among the top 5 project managers for the LTI CEO award. He was rated as a problem solving and risk mitigation expert on multiple project implementation. He is also rated as one of the top program managers managing multiple SAP rollouts in US and European countries. He started Lotus Domino practice from inception, increasing team size to 35 and revenue of $2 million US dollars over 4 years. He also has experience of teaching machine learning in around 15 colleges in Mumbai. And he has worked in different capacities like project manager, quality manager, program manager, and key delivery manager. So thank you very much. Thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation, and over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I think, Kalyani ma'am, just a small correction. Today I've been working with more than 100 colleges. I'm not sure that 50 number has come from where, doesn't matter. First of all, good morning to all. A nice introduction, ma'am, and thanks for this opportunity. Before I start, okay, I've got the sharing right, so that's no problem. Okay. So before I start, there are a few things which I would like to emphasize here. First of all, let's make this session as interactive as possible. That's the way I teach. I don't get into a monologue mode. And please unmute and speak as far as possible. And you can also send something on chat, but generally when I'm on the PPT, I'm focusing on the PPT, then I may not be able to focus on the chat. So maybe I think Kalyani ma'am, you can interrupt me if there's any question, so that I don't miss out those questions to answer. But at the same time, I would urge everybody to unmute and speak, right? That is one aspect. Second aspect is after every session, I'll be basically asking people to clarify on chatbot whether they've understood or not. So please respond so that I know that you guys are in pace with what I'm doing. And lastly, please share whatever you know, as much as whatever little I know. I think you guys as research scholars or doctorates, I'm sure you must be doing a lot of work on artificial neural networks or in machine learning. So please share your thoughts and it will be very useful for the entire group. I hope my screen is visible. I'm just trying to not get into a slide mode so that at least everybody, I can see the chat also in parallel, right? So let's do this. So before I get into artificial neural networks, I wanted to first get into something called classification. And for that, because I'll be showing some use cases for classification data. And before I get into that, I wanted to understand from any one of you, what is the difference between regression and classification? Anybody, please? What is the difference between regression and classification? Kalyani ma'am, has this been covered in the earlier sessions?
Yes, sir. It has covered yesterday. There was one session on classification model, sir.
Very good. Okay. So very nice. So can somebody tell me the difference? I'm sure regression also must have been covered. I don't know if regression is covered or not, but if anybody has any idea about difference between regression and classification? I request everybody to participate, please. Yes, Ratna Kumari, Ma'am, yeah, what is it? Fine. So when you talk about regression classification, typically if I have got features and my output, right? So the features are my independent variable, which we are all aware of, and the output is my dependent variable, correct? Now that could be when you're talking of a supervised model where you've got regression classification, you could have multiple features or independent variables that will always be one output variable, right? So when you talk of regression, in the case of regression, the dependent variable is continuous. That means the value can change depending on the value of the features, correct? But in the case of classification, the value is discrete. The dependent variable or the output is discrete. That means it could have a set of values, either 0 or 1, or it could have a set of images, or for example, from a healthcare perspective, whether somebody is suffering from cancer or not. So you could have a value 0, which means a person does not have cancer, or 1, that means a person has cancer, right? So when you talk about classification, so classification again is typically having where a dependent variable has discrete set of values, right? So that's how I will define classification. Going back to the presentation, so typically, if you see one of the famous data sets which is available today is the vertebrate data set, which is generally used as one of the as starting points in any classification lecture. And typically, if you see, there are multiple features here where you have the name, the body temperature, the skin color, the gives birth. Okay, these are the multiple features, and the output is a class label, which will have a fixed set of values, whether it could be a mammal or a reptile or a bird and fish and so on, right? So they have a fixed set of values. And typically, in any algorithm, we have something called a training set and a test set, right?
Sir, can you put this presentation on slide mode because it's not visible?
Okay, is it okay now? One minute,
Yeah.
Okay, so let me put chat here. So you will always have a training set and a test set, right? So typically, training set is mainly used for training the model, training the machine so that the machine is able to derive a pattern between the output and the input features. And to test the accuracy of the model, we have the test set. And that's why we typically have a training set, which is generally not less than 70 to 75% of the overall data. And the test set could be up to 25 to 30% of the overall population of data, right? Now, when we talk about classification, there are various models available, right? So you have the base model is called the logistic regression. Then you have the decision trees, you have the random forest, which is also called the ensemble method. You have the k nearest neighbors, which is another model. You have the naive Bayes algorithm, which is based on probability. You have support vector matrix. This is another model. You also have the kernel support vector matrix. So there are various such models which are used to basically to evaluate any data. Okay. And for evaluation of or to find out the accuracy of the model, we use a matrix called the confusion matrix, right? And just to give an example of a confusion matrix, so if you see, as you know, in any algorithm, whenever you are training the model with some training data, you come out with a pattern, right? That pattern which is formed, you use the test data to input into the model. So if I go back to this quickly, I'll just show here. So when you have the training data, okay, which is used to train the model and derive a pattern, right? And derive, please ignore my spelling checks, please focus on the contents. And so we'll train the model and derive a specific pattern. Okay. And once you have derived a particular pattern, then what I'm doing is using the test data, I'm inputting the independent variables or the features to the model. And what I'm coming out, because the model has predicted some pattern out of the data based on the training it has undergone from the training data, that once the test data is independent variables are inputted to the model, then the model is coming out with a pattern, and that pattern I will call it as Y predict. Okay, in machine learning terms, it is called Y predict. And then I compare the Y predict versus with the Y actuals. Y actuals is my actual independent variable or the actual test data output. And that is where if my Y predict and if I compare that, with that, I can measure the performance of the model. And if I can get an accuracy of at least 85-90%, I can recommend my model to my customer. As you know, machine learning models are never 100% accurate, right? You will try the best of the models, the most clean of data, you will never get 100%. We still have yet to get 100% because after all, it's a machine, right? So even the customers understand that anything maybe up 90-95% also is good enough for them to recommend a model. And that is how the benchmark we use in industry whenever we propose any model to the customer, right? So this is typically how we do a Y predict versus Y actuals. Now, once you have understood this concept, okay, is this clear to all what I mentioned here? This is very important. I'm sure many of you must be understand, but I just want to check with you. Have you guys understood this? How Y pred and Y actuals, how Y predict is calculated? I mean, I think you know, the font size. I mean, I don't. Is the font size okay? I don't know. I think it's readable, right, to all.
But sir, if you will increase the font size a little bit, it will be helpful.
Font size. Let me see where do you increase the font size. These are text, right? So let me just check. Okay, font. So let me take font 14. Yeah. Is this okay now? Is this better?
Better, sir.
Yeah, yeah. So has everybody understood this concept? What I explained, this Y pred and Y actuals. Can I get a yes or no on the chat box, please? Have you understood or no? You can unmute and speak, or you can enter your response on the chat box, please. Okay. Now my problem is, okay. Okay, great. So this should be okay, fine. Now that you have understood this, let me go back to the presentation. So when I'm talking of a confusion matrix, this is my predicted value of the dependent variable, which I derived from the model. And this is the actual data, which is my actual test data. Now, the way the matrix is calculated is that suppose I have a sample of 100 records of my test data. Now there are 35 records which says that my predicted value is 0. I mean, let's say assume that 0 is say a person is not buying a car. I'm just giving an example. Or a person is not having cancer and one person is having cancer, right? So there are 35 people where the model says that he does not have cancer and actually does not have cancer. That means the model is working perfectly fine, right? There are 50 cases where the model predicts that he has cancer, but actually also he has cancer. So very fine. Model is working perfectly fine. But let's record these two stray cases. So in this case, the number 5 says that there are 5 numbers where the predicted value, you're predicting that he has got cancer, but actually he does not have cancer. right? And there are 10 cases here where I have predicted that he does not have cancer, but actually he has cancer. Now I will explain to you why this red and yellow in the next slide. But for now, just from an interpretation perspective, the way I'm going to calculate the metrics is something called the accuracy rate, which is this plus this divided by total, which is 85%. And my error rate is this plus this divided by 100 total, that is 15%. Okay. Now, if I look at, now if I look at this one, this slide, okay, this gives you a very clear picture of what I'm trying to explain. Now, as an imagine that you have from a healthcare perspective, I have got a predicted value here and actual value here. So what this says, what is true positive? Now, plus means that a person has cancer and minus means the person does not have cancer. So there are classification, there are two set of values. Now, when you say true plus, that means the person actually has got cancer, that is true plus, and predicted also, the model also predicting he has got cancer. That's why it's called true positive. Let's look at this true negative. So again here, I have estimated that he does not have cancer, predicted, and actually also he does not have cancer. So we are fine. That's true negative. Now look at this one. This says that the person actually does not have cancer, that is minus, but the model is predicting that he has cancer. Okay, this is a less severe because the model is saying he does not have cancer, but the model says that he has cancer, but actually he does not have cancer, right? So this is still less of a problem. Okay, that's why it is called type 1 error and it is in a different color. And what is the most critical is this false, this is called false positive. False negative is where what I'm saying is I'm predicting that he does not have cancer, but actually he has got cancer. If this is the situation and if a model behaves like that, then you have a big problem. Because you're saying that he is not going to have cancer, but actually he's having cancer. That means the model needs to be corrected. Or we need to look out for a different model, right? So the aim here is to reduce the false positives. And most important, we need to reduce the false negatives, right? So this combination, this is how you will measure the true positive, false positive, false negative, and true negative. And it's very beautifully explained here. I'm anyway going to share this PPT with Kalyani ma'am. She will share with all of you guys. Don't worry about it. For now, just focus on what I'm doing. So these are the true positives I explained, true negatives, false positive, and false positive and false negative. So this type 1 and type 2 errors, out of which the type 2 error is the most critical, right? That's why it is highlighted in red. Now, the metrics that we use to measure a classification model is the accuracy, which I already talked to you, the misclassification rate or the error rate. There are two important ones, what is additional, which is called the precision and the recall. And what is precision? Precision is TP, true positive, divided by total true predictions. True predictions is TP plus FP, right? And recall is TP divided by actual true, that is TP divided by TP plus FN. So essentially, if I want to improve my model, my precision has to be high, my recall has to be high, and my accuracy has to be high. Only if these three parameters are high, then only I can recommend my model, right? So typically, if I have to reduce my if I reduce my FP and FN, then obviously this value will be close to 1, right? So that is why to measure a classification model, typically we use the accuracy, the precision, and the recall, right? And this is how an example we have given. How do you calculate the various metrics? Is there any question on this? Have you guys understood? Okay, so typically what happens in the industry, when you have a set of data, you will try different models. You will try logistic regression, you will try decision trees, you will try random forest, you will try even support vector matrix and others, and then look at the model which gives you the highest metrics or the highest accuracy. So that is how you try different models and see the one which is giving the highest accuracy, right? So you will have to work with the various models and see the one which works. There is no specific rule. Okay, we try different models. There are some limitations in logistic and regression. Logistic regression doesn't give a very high accuracy. It's not very well recommended. If you look at decision trees also is not recommended because it leads to overfitting. The most recommended values are the random forest, which anyway uses decision trees, but it uses an aggregator method, which I'm not going to talk to you here. I'm sure many of you may be aware. And there are other models like the support vector matrix, which is also very, very popular, which is tested out. So you try out various models. There are some plus or minuses, but typically I've seen the decision trees and logistic regression are very rarely used, right? Does that answer your question? Okay. Fine. Now, have you understood this particular matrix, everybody? Is this clear to all? Can I get a yes or no on the screen, on the chat box?
Sir, please, can you explain once again?
Yeah. So I request all of you to please participate. If you don't participate, I don't know whether you guys have understood. So please participate. It helps me. Okay. So are you clear on this particular slide, ma'am?
No, sir, actually confusion with the confusion matrix.
Oh, you were not there in yesterday. I don't know whether confusion matrix was covered yesterday in your session. Is this you're talking about this slide, your this particular slide?
Yes.
Are you clear?
Yes, sir.
Are you clear on this slide?
Yes, a little bit, but not completely. I get confused. I tried to cover it by own, but it is not covered by me.
Okay, so as I'm saying that you have understood what is y predict and y actuals. Is this clear?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That is clear, which I showed you in one of the examples in the notepad, correct? Having said that, what I'm saying, the predicted value and the actual value can have only two values, 0 and 1. Okay, we are talking of a classification model. So we are looking at the accuracy of a model. So how do you measure the accuracy? Suppose, and we use the test data to measure the accuracy of the model. Okay, and if I've got 100 test records, so this is totally 100, and there are 35 cases where the model gives you an answer of, say, 0 means 0 means a person does not have cancer, and 1 means he has cancer. Okay, so there are 35 cases where the predicted and actual value is 0. That means you have predicted he does not have cancer, and actually he does not have cancer. So the model is working perfect. It is working as per the actuals. There are 50 cases where we have predicted that he has cancer, and actually also he has got cancer, right? So this is also perfectly fine. So the model is working fine as per the actual data. But there are 15 cases where the model has predicted here that he has got cancer, but actually he does not have cancer. That means the model is not representing the actual data, right? And there are 10 cases where you have predicted that he does not have cancer, but actually he has got cancer. So these are the cases where the model is not behaving as per the actual data. And this represents the error rate. And that is where we are calculating the accuracy rate, which is 35 plus 50 divided by 100, and error rate is 15 divided by 100. So total is 100%. Is this clear to you now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, is this clear to you if you compare this with this?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So
Yes, sir.
So this is okay. So just always look at this. Plus mean he's having cancer, and minus he does not have cancer. and just correlate with this, you will again find out the accuracy, right?
Okay,
And
sir.
as I said, this is the type 1 error, which is false positive. This is one. And this is the type 2 error, false negative, which is the most critical, because I had predicted that he does not have cancer, but actually he has got cancer, right? Which is obviously not the right, which is of course not the right model which we can recommend, right? So that is how we measure the accuracy. And these are the 4 metrics which are used to measure the accuracy, the error rate, the precision, and the recall. And as I said, your accuracy, precision, and recall should be at least 85% to recommend this model to any customer. Is this clear to all now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a case study of a healthcare, and I will show you a particular script running in Jupyter Notebook. Okay. Now, before I get into that, there's one important thing I want to highlight here is that whenever I do any analysis of my input data, one of the things I do is to find out the correlation between the various independent variables or correlation between the independent variable and the dependent variable. Okay. So there are various plots available. One is called the scatter plot. Okay. A scatter plot says that if this is my dependent variable and dependent variable, and if I get a graph like this, that means it's a linear dependent, the trend line. That means when the independent variable increases, the dependent variable increases, right? In the same direction, right? There's something called correlation coefficient. It helps you to measure the correlation between the independent and the dependent variables, or even between the independent variables. Now there is another important plot that we use. So if you look at a scatter plot, this shows that there are 2 variables are strongly linear to each other. This shows if this is a dependent, this is 2 variables, either could be dependent and independent, or 2 independent variables. This shows that they are negatively linear. That means if one increases, the other reduces. And third could be this situation where you could have 2 variables, but you see it is very scattered. You're not able to make any correlation between the 2 variables in the graph, right? So this becomes very important for you to, when you do a data analysis, what you call the exploratory data analysis, one of the things that you do is find out the correlation between the various variables. And there could be some variables which is not at all of any value. In that case, you can decide whether you want to drop that variable or you keep that variable. So that is something, a decision you take based on the analysis you do for the data. There is one very important library called SNS. I think many of you, I'm not sure how many of you are technical, but don't worry about it. If you guys are technical, it's fine. If you're not technical, just don't worry about it. So there are functions available whereby you can have various variables, various features, and the same features on the x and y axis. And you can find the correlation between any 2 variables, which says that if the variable value here is close to 1, that means both the variables are dependent, positively linear. If the value is close to 0, that means the 2 values are independent. That means the variables have no dependency on each other. And if the value is negative, that means they are negatively correlated. That means if one increases, the other decreases. This is called a heat map in machine learning terms. And I will show you when actually I show it in the Jupyter Notebook, right? So what I have is this is a test case where there are various features. Okay, these are the various features. I'm not a healthcare domain expert, so but these are the various features, and this decides whether a cancer is malignant, which is 1, or cancer is not malignant, that is 0. So my target variable is 0 and 1, which I explained to you as part of the confusion matrix. And I'm going to use a support vector machine model to run this particular data to execute this data, and I will calculate what is my confusion matrix, the metrics for the confusion matrix with the accuracy, the precision and recall and so on. Okay, the confusion matrix, right? So let me do one thing. I'll go to, okay, let me go back here. Okay, so this is an example of a cancer diagnosis, whether it is benign or malignant. Okay, so this particular script is already executed, so I will not execute, but I'll show you the output here. So these are the various features: radius, texture, perimeter, area, smoothness, compactness, and so on, right? And there are totally 30 input features, 30 independent variables. There are 569 records, out of which 212 records represent malignant cancer and 357 records represent benign. Okay, so these are the target class. 260. This is the target class, which is benign or malignant, right? So what I'm doing here is I'm importing various libraries. So there are some libraries used in Python, which is used to execute various functions. Okay, some of the libraries called the pandas, which is typically used for data manipulation. NumPy is used for data statistical analysis. Matplotlib is again used for graphical analysis, and Seaborn is another very powerful library which is used to measure the, again, to do a graphical analysis, right? Now what I'm using, this is my data set load_brace.cancer, which there is a data set. Scikit-learn is a library. There is a data set is a function, or there's a library within this sklearn, and I'm importing this particular data set. Okay, and I'm assigning it to this variable called cancer. Okay, and within that, so there are various attributes to that. Okay, these are all the features. I showed you those features in the PPT. These are the values of the target variables 0 and 1. 0 means it is benign cancer, and 1 means it is malignant cancer. Okay. Now these are various commands to check the first 5 records of my data and the last 5 records of the data. Okay, there are various such commands. Let's go to the important step. Now this is one of the steps where this is the scatter plot. I told you about the scatter plot, where I can measure the correlation between two variables. Okay, whether it is linear dependent or it is totally independent. Okay, this is one way of looking at it. Or another way of looking at it is I can use a heat map. This is the heat map I told you about, which says which variable has got the highest dependency between the two variables on the x-axis and the y-axis. So as I said, something close to 0.99 means it has got a very close correlation. If it's 0.7 to 0.85, very close relation. Minus 0.26 is linear, negatively dependent, and you could have something close to 0, which means they are not dependent on each other at all. So this is how, with a single command, you can find out the correlation between the different 30 features that you have between each other, and also between the features and the dependent variable, which is your target 0 and 1. Okay. Now, what I'm doing here is obviously. Yeah, can you please go on mute, please? Who is not talking? Yeah. So,
Participants, please mute yourself. Thank you.
So now you have, obviously you know the total data, so you assign which is going to be your independent variable. So your independent variable is all the features like the mean radius, mean texture, mean parameter, and so on. And that is my x, and my y, which is my dependent variable, is that's a target variable, will have the value of 0 and 1, whether it has got a malignant cancer or we have the this one. You have the benign cancer, right? Now this is where I'm splitting my data. So what I'm doing is 80% of my data I'm taking as training set, and 20% of my data is taking tests. Out of the 569 records, 80% I'm taking for the training and 20% I'm taking as test. Okay, so this shows me the split up of the training and the test. 30, this is number of records, this is number of features or the independent variables. And 114 comma, why comma? There's nothing after that because obviously there'll be always one dependent variable. And here I'm using the support vector matrix algorithm to train the model. Okay, I'm using the support vector matrix to train the model. Once I have trained the model, okay, then I evaluate the model. What do you mean by evaluation the model? Is that I use the independent variables of the test data, I feed it into the model and come out with a Y predict. I showed you in my notepad. So now I will compare Y predict with the Y test, which is my test data, and that will, using the confusion matrix function, I will be able to calculate the accuracy of the model. Okay, now if I want to see the accuracy of the model here, this is how it shows. It shows my precision is 0.95 average. My recall is 0.93, which is very good. My F1 score is basically average of precision and recall is 0.94. Okay, and accuracy also is 0.94. That means this model support vector matrix is working brilliantly with this particular set of data. And if I've got this data to be, which is given to me by the client, I will propose this support vector, this particular algorithm or model to my customer. And this is how I typically run a machine learning script. So I start with importing my libraries, I import my data sets, I identify the independent and dependent variables. Okay, I do some exploratory data analysis using the heat map and the scatter plot. Then I train the model with the training data. Then I predict the output based on the model. I predict the output and compare the predicted and output from the test data. And based on that, I calculate the confusion matrix, which is your recall, accuracy, and precision. Is this clear to all? Can I get a quick yes or no on the screen? If you have understood or not understood? Yeah, if you have 100 features, obviously you can select in the heat map. Maybe you want to take only first 30 features, or you can take 20 features. Right? You have parameters you can decide. Right? So you can decide how many features you want to compare. Right? So that is possible.
Yeah, good morning, sir. Could you please explain that heat map again, sir?
So heat map. So what I'm doing is I've got the various features here and the same features I've got here. Now, obviously, if my radius is here, radius is 1. That means obviously I'm comparing the apple to apple. So obviously it's going to be 1, right? So if you see everything which is diagonal is all 1 because I'm comparing the same values. Now what these values represent is called the coefficient of correlation. If you guys are aware of statistics, there is a way to calculate the coefficient of correlation where if the value is close to 0, that means the two variables are not dependent on each other. If the value is close to 1, that means the values are linearly dependent. That means if one increases, the other increases. And if the value is negative, that means if one decreases, if one increases, the other one decreases. So it's got negatively dependent on each other. So this particular value, which is called the correlation coefficient, which is a statistical term which calculates, it tells you how closely or whether those particular variables, this is y-axis and the x-axis are dependent on each other. Is this clear to you?
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Okay. Any questions on this particular script that I ran before I get into artificial neural network? Okay, so all of you understood. Now let me get back to my. So can somebody tell me, or somebody has heard about artificial neural networks? Why it is used? Anybody, please? Why this term of ANN has come? Artificial neural network.
So firstly, it predicts the values as per the humans as we are thinking in our mind. So it is closely related to our way of thinking as a human. So they can do the processing but fast as compared to the humans. So that's why we prefer ANNs.
Hey, why is NN used compared to a normal machine learning model?
Actually, sir, you can say like when human brain the
No, you're talking about the concept of neurons and all that. That is fine. How that artificial, but why? How this concept has come? Why it is becoming important?
We no need to extract the features.
No need to.
Extract the features.
What do you mean by no need to extract the features?
Retrieve the features. Yes, sir.
Sorry, I didn't understand. Not able to extract the features. Can you give me an example?
We no need to retrieve the features, sir. Like
No
attributes.
need to retrieve the feature. Okay. So,
In artificial neural network, everything will do by the system. And extracting the features, so everything will do the system. That neural network will do.
no, that is fine. But okay, let me. I think the main question we have not understood. So, first of all, why artificial neural networks are used? Number one is, or when you that how the deep learning concept has come. So, first of all, if you have a large complex data or large volume of data where there is no proper linearity you can derive between the data, that's where artificial neural networks become very, very important. And when you're talking of images, when you're talking of okay, unstructured data like images, audios, and all those stuff, right? So typical machine learning models will not work. So you have, because you have the complex of data, to handle this data, you need to have deep learning or what is called neural networks. Of course, for images, we have something called the convolutional neural networks. But the idea of deep learning on neural networks is essentially to handle complex, large, non-linear data. Okay, and that is where ANN has become very important. Okay, so can you please, ma'am, can you please unmute this person? Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. English Rose, ma'am.
Sir, I think I should mute all the participants, sir. They are disturbing in between, sir.
Or the specific you can find out, no, whether the who is talking.
Yeah,
You can mute it. So that way you can. Because if you, but don't mute everybody, then I'll not able to get any feedback.
okay.
Okay, just just mute the person who is talking. That's it. Okay. Okay. So when you talk of artificial neural networks, essentially, when you talk about the neurons, which is on the brains, right? You have the brain cells, which has got neurons, and neurons are especially used for transmitting messages or information from one layer to another, right? So typically, if you see here, you have, this is called the nucleus, is called, this is the neurons. These are all the dendrites, which are the input layers. Okay. Now, when I'm talking of the input layer, if I've got 4 independent variables, each variable is one input layer. right? So you have got input layer 1, input layer 2, input layer 3, input layer 4. You could have 10 features, 20 features, so on. So when you have input layer, it represents the independent variable. Okay. And then when the messages are when the messages flow from these neurons to another set of neurons, so essentially you are essentially activating neurons as you go from here to here. You are processing these neurons, and ultimately you are getting an output. And this output is your predicted output. The Y pred, which I talked to you in the classification data, is again a Y predicted, which I'm calculating, but the model or the way I'm doing it is using the neural networks architecture. Okay. So if you typically see, you have an input layer, you have hidden layers. Now this, you need to have at least one hidden layer. Now hidden layer will have n number of neurons. Okay. So you have one hidden layer here. So all these inputs are basically using this to activate each of these neurons. I'll come to know what is this activation later. But these inputs these are the input layer. These are the various neurons. These neurons activate these neurons, and these neurons finally, after activation, it will give you a final desired output, which is called the predicted output. Okay. So typically, if you see in an artificial neural network, again, as I said, you have an input layer. And this is a very simple case where you have only one hidden layer, which is having 4 neurons, and you have one output, which is either 0 and 1, a binary classifier. Okay, and this is an example how this is how you're representing this architecture out here, right? This is how the axon, this is how the transmission happens through the axon to the next layer. So you could have multiple layers of neurons, and finally you could have one output layer, right? So there are two types. One you call a single layer, which is also called the perceptron, where you have just a single neuron. You have multiple independent variables. As I said, each independent variable, this is x1, x2, x3. This forms a portion of your input layer. Then you have the neuron using the input layer. Okay, let me come here. So you have the inputs here. You have the weights. Now there is something called weights, which are used for each independent layer, for each independent input value, and these weights are multiplied by the xi value. Okay, and we use something called an activation function here at each layer. So at whether it is a hidden layer or whether it is an output layer, we use an activation function, and this activation function is used to limit the value of the output, right? So the way to represent the activation function is sigma wi into xi. And typically, if you see, either you could have, this is an interconnected multi-layer, which is used typically in your convolutional neural networks, where you have each neuron which is activating the specific neuron. This is activating this, 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 and so on, right? And this is your output layer. So you have one hidden layer, second hidden layer, and third is your output layer. And this obviously is your input layer, right? So you will always have an input layer which decides the number of features, or depending on the number of features or the number of independent variables, you could have number of hidden layers. I will come to that, how you calculate, and then you finally come to the output layer, right? So activation function is very, very important. As I said, when you talk to an activation function is sigma of wi xi, okay, and this sigma of wi xi is used to activate. The activation function is used at every layer, hidden layers, as well as the output layer, to limit the value of the dependent variable. Okay, and why activation functions are used? Very important. They are used to perform complex computations in the hidden layers and then transfer the result to the output layer. The primary function is to introduce non-linear properties in the neural network. They convert the linear input signals into non-linear output signals to facilitate the learning of high-order polynomials. As I said, your complexity of data is such that the correlation could be in the polynomial level, degree 2, 3, 4, and so on. So because of the complexity of the data, that's where your activation function becomes very, very important. The task of the neural networks is to compute high complicated calculations, and without activation function, neural networks cannot learn and model other complicated data, including images, speech, videos, and audios. So whenever you use whenever you are going to use speech audio in your machine learning algorithms, you need to use activation functions to limit the values of the output, right? So this is very, very important about the activation functions. Now I will explain you some of the important activation functions that is used today. Okay, the first and most important function, which is called the softmax, or it is also called the threshold. So if I have a classification data, I've got hidden layers and I've got output layers. So whenever I'm using the output layer, and in my output layer, the output, that means my output value could be either binary, that means 0 or 1, or it could be multi-probability. Like suppose I say my output has got 3 images, or say I have got cat, dog, and say horse. And the probability that it is a cat could be 20%, probability that it is a dog could be 30%, and probably it could be a horse is 50%. The total probability becomes 100%. But the values are multi-probability, right? Multi-class probability. So either you could have a multi-class probability, which is total adding to 100%, or you could have a single value, could be either 0% or 100%. So wherever you have a binary or a multi-class probability for the output layer, we use the threshold function, okay, called the softmax. We use the softmax or the threshold activation function, right? Similarly, we use something called a sigmoid or the logistic function, which is only used when you have a binary class probability. So if the value is only 0 and 1, then I would go for a sigmoid or logistics. But if my value is multi-probabilistics, then I need to go for softmax. So that's the main difference. Is softmax is mainly used for multilinear and binary, but sigmoid can be used only for binary. It cannot be used for multi-probabilistic output, right? The third important function which is used, this is used in the hidden layers, and this is the most prominently used, is called the rectifier linear unit, RLU, right? Now, rectifier unit says that you take maximum of sigma wi xi and 0. So it limits the value depending on, if the value is less than 0, it will make the value 0. If the value is more than 0, it will take the actual value of sigma wi xi. So typically rectifiers are used, or RLUs are used in the hidden layers for activating the neurons for the subsequent layers, right? There are some other activation functions like hyperbolic tangent, which is typically used in, if you have heard of recurrent or recursive neural networks, or for NLPs and speech recognition, we use something called activation function called the hyperbolic tangent. We use linear activation functions in regression function. If you have a multiple regression data, and if you want to use neural networks libraries, then you use these linear activation functions to basically as an activation function in the hidden layer, right? Sorry, in the output layer. It is used in the linear regression output layer. So if I represent the full thing, you have got x1, x2, xm. You have the weights. Okay, you do the activation. Again, I said you do the activation. If it's a threshold activation, you use this function. If you use sigmoid, you use this. I told you depending on whether it is by multi-probabilistic or whether it is a binary class. You have this particular threshold activation or a sigmoid activation you use for the output layer, right? Depending on the dependent variable, that is my output layer, dependent variable value, right? Any questions at this point of time? Anybody has questions before I get into? Okay, this I've already explained. So I talked about, okay, now this one thing I want to explain you. Now imagine that you have a regression function where you have, these are the various parameters, and this is the output value. So your price of a house depends on the area square feet, the number of bedrooms, the distance to the city, and age of the house, right? Age of the building. So this becomes a regression, multi-regression functions, because you've got multiple features, and using artificial neural networks, you can basically find out the predicted value of the, you can use the model to predict this particular set of data. This is again a software activation. As I said, you could have 3 different outputs where the probability is 67%, 24%, 9%. So total is basically 100%. So this is how you measure the, using the software max activation, you essentially find out this is used for the output layer where there is a multi-class probability. Any questions before I get into gradient descent? Have you guys understood the importance of activation functions? What is the input layer, hidden layer, output layer? Can I get a quick yes or no on the screen?
Hello, sir. Input layer is considered a flatter layer. What is the function of this?
Now the input layer is essentially, no, input layer is not, is essentially what I am doing is that I am taking all my, see, I've got, if my data has got 10 features, x1 to x10. So my input layer consists of x1, x2, x3, x4, and so on. Those are my inputs to the hidden layer. So in my inputs, I apply some weight. I will come to what is weight later, but I apply some weights so that I can then, by using the weights, I activate my neurons in the subsequent layers. And finally, using the activation function, I limit the output of the, to basically then compare with the predicted value with the actual output. So input layer is mainly depends on the number of features you have. So when I'm going to execute the script, I will show you. Okay.
Okay, sir, thank you.
Now, all of you, are you aware of this something called cost function? Is anybody aware of what is cost function?
It's used for loss analysis.
Yeah. So essentially what happens is that whenever you have a y predict and y actuals, right? So you have to ensure that your y predict and y actuals are close to each other. If y predict and y actuals are close to each other, that means if I do a sigma of y minus y predict the whole square, okay, that is called the cost function, or it is also called the mean square error. So you have to ensure that your mean square error is minimum. That means your y predict and the actual value has to be close to each other, and then only I can say my model is efficient. So the function of any model, and if you have heard of gradient descent, which is used in the regression model or in any model. So what happens? See, just reduce here. So what happens initially? You give some value of the weights. Maybe some initial value of the weights are given, which is multiplied with the value of the independent variable. Now weights are adjusted in every iteration so as to reduce the cost function. Okay. Now there is something called learning rate. What is learning rate? Now learning rate is so whenever you know, you go through one cycle. Okay, you let me just explain you this one. This will give an example. Okay, I'll explain you by this particular thing. Now there is something called a forward propagation and a backward propagation. Okay, so what happens is initially these are the inputs. You have the weights. There is an initial value of the weights. Using the weights are used to activate the neurons. And as you activate the neurons, as the activation function is executed, you get an output. Once you get an output, you compare, that is your predicted output. So you compare the predicted output with the actual output. If the error is high, if the cost function or the mean square error is high, then what I'm doing a backward propagation. So what I'm doing is I'm readjusting the weights. So when I readjust, now the readjustment of the weights happens based on the learning rate. So in gradient descent, what happens based on the error, the learning rate is adjusted, and the learning rate will determine what should be the value of the weights when you do a backward propagation. And the weights will again activate all these neurons, and it will go back, and finally you will get another set of output. Then you will again compare the predicted output and actual output. So for every set of data, you will have for every record of data, you will have a forward propagation where you will input that data into the various hidden layers, come out with the output, compare with the actual output. If the actual output and the predicted output, there's a big difference where you have a large mean square error, you do a backward propagation whereby you adjust the weights based on the learning rate in gradient descent, and it does a backward propagation with the main intention of how you can reduce the error or increase the accuracy. So this is how you use the concept of forward propagation and backward propagation. And this is very important. This is one iteration which is done to basically adjust the cost function. Is this clear to all?
Sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, as I said, what is the function of cost function? It is sigma of half of yi minus, this is my y predict. Y caret is always called the y predict minus y actual the whole square. Okay. So I have to minimize my cost function for my model to be efficient. Okay. So we are saying that backward propagation is a subset of gradient descent, which is the implementation of gradient descent in the multilinear networks. So when I'm doing a forward and backward propagation, I'm actually implementing the gradient descent because I'm using the learning rate to adjust the weights whenever I'm doing a backward propagation, so as to get to minimize the cost function or to increase my accuracy. Okay. So now there are two types of gradient descent. One is called a batch gradient descent, and one is called a stochastic gradient descent. Now, what is batch gradient descent? In batch gradient descent, what I'm doing, I will, if I've got 100 records, I will go through all the 100 records, calculate the error or calculate the accuracy, and then for all the set of 100 records, I will adjust the weights. For all the 100 records, I will adjust the weights. Okay, and I will again do a backward propagation. Okay, and then I will recalculate the accuracy or I will recalculate the error. So I will take all the 100 records, and then after going through all the records, based on the error, the learning rate will be adjusted, and based on the learning rate, the weights will be adjusted only after going through all sets of records. This is called batch stochastic gradient or batch gradient descent. What is stochastic gradient descent, which is used widely? I take a series of records. I mean, I take a batch. Maybe I will take first only 10 records, then I will take another 10 records, another 10 records, and like that. So I will update. Okay, either I can update, I can take a batch size of 1, or I can do a batch size of 3. I will take 3 records at a time. Okay, so after 1 record, after 3 records, I will adjust the weights based on the learning rate, and I will again recalculate the error or recalculate the accuracy. Okay, so the main difference of gradient descent batch is it does for the complete set of records, it updates the weights. In the case of stochastic gradient descent, either it takes is a batch size. So batch size could be 1, which is typically not used. We use either batch size 10, 20. That means we will take 20 records at a time, adjust the weights based on the learning rate, okay, and do a backward propagation. And again, the take the next set of records, again next set of records, and that's how it calculates the accuracy. Okay. If you see here, stochastic gradient descent adjusts updates weights after each training sample or batch of sample. Weights are adjusted in every iteration so as to reduce the cost function. Okay, so this is the main difference between a batch gradient descent and a stochastic gradient descent, and we typically use the stochastic gradient descent in the industry for in the artificial neural networks, because typically batch gradient descent also becomes very computational intensive. So today, if I have to do ANN, I need to have a GPU. I cannot use a normal CPU. I need to have a graphical process unit, because you have a large amount of complex data, and when you come to images in CNN, you need to do a lot of processing in terms of pixels and computation and all that, right? So generally, when you do ANN, you always need to have a GPU, graphical process unit, for faster processing. So let me just go through this line, very nicely explained. So what I'm doing, randomly initialize the weights to some small number, say 0, something close to 0. Input the first observation of your data set in the input layer, each feature in one input node, right? Forward propagation from left to right, the neurons are activated in a way that the impact of each neuron's activation is limited by the weights. Propagate the activations until getting the predicted result Y. Compare the predicted result to the actual result, that's a mean square error or the cost function. Measure the generated error. Backward propagation from right to left, the error is backward propagated. Update the weights according to how much they are responsible for the error. Very important. Update the weights according to how much they're responsible for the error, and what decides the weights, how much adjustment is done, is the learning rate. The learning rate decides by how much we need to update the weights. So repeat these steps either for each observation, or you can do it for a batch of observations. Okay, either the batch could be the complete set of data, which is batch gradient descent, or a sample of data, which is the stochastic gradient descent, right? And once you go through the complete set of full data, we call it an epoch. That means if you've got the 100 records, you have a sample size of 10, 10, 10, 10. So what I do is I take the first 10 records, I do the forward propagation, I calculate the predicted value. Based on that, my learning rate will adjust the weights and do a backward propagation. Then take the next set 10 records, take the next 10 records. I do 10 times, so there are 100 records. After 100 records, I complete one epoch. Then based on my learning of the 100 records, I again recalculate the learning rate, and I again start to do it for the second epoch, third epoch, and so on. And typically, when you run it, you see when you increase the number of epochs, generally the accuracy increases. Okay, there are multiple parameters which decide the accuracy. Number one, how much neurons you can take in your layer. Number two, how much number of hidden layers. When you need to have 2 hidden layers, 3 hidden layers, 4 hidden layers, that will decide the, those are also one of the parameters. And third is how many epochs. Okay, whether you want to write, do the full set of data, you have to run it 50 times or 60 times or 100 times. So based on our experience, you need to fine tune these parameters in such a way that you can get the highest accuracy or the lowest error. Is this slide clear to all of you? Any questions on this slide? Very important. Because when I'm going to explain you a test case, a use case, sorry, this becomes very, very important.
Yes.
Anybody
sir,
has
I
any
want to
questions
ask
on
the
this?
question basically.
Yeah. Please go ahead.
Yes, sir. Okay. Sir, the epoch value is set by the programmer manually in the program. What is the significance of this epoch value on the accuracy?
So what happens
Because
is
every time
once, yeah.
the application change the epoch value.
So when you are doing the epoch value, suppose what is epoch? You go through one set of records, say 100 records. Okay. Once you have gone through the 100 records, then what I'm doing is I'm again recalculating the learning rate, because based on the error it has gone through the 100 records. Okay, it will again recalculate the learning rate, and it will try to adjust the weights again for the next set of epochs. Okay, for all the 100 records. Then again, based on the learning of the 100 records, it again do the next epoch. So it is learning as it goes through the complete set of records. It has gone through the error, and it is adjusting the learning rate to try to minimize the cost function. Is this clear?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Getting this. Thank you, sir.
Anybody has any questions on this? Okay, fine. Now, so this is just an example of how you use the activation function and how do you minimize the cost function by do the backward propagation and readjust the weights. Okay, these are just examples which I've. This is an example of a regression where you have got multiple features and output based on the number of quiz you have gone through, the amount of hours you sleep, and the study hours will decide how much of percentage you have got in the exam. So you can write a model. You can basically use an ANN to represent this data, right? And similarly, this is how you adjust. So you adjust weights in such a way to reduce the cost function. So whatever I've told you is well nicely represented here. Okay, and this is how you measure the cost function using the backward propagation and the forward and backward propagation. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to execute one script. Now in this particular test data, while it is not specific to healthcare, because whether it's healthcare or whether it is retail or whether it is any other domain, the concept is the same, right? How you're going to create the hidden layers, how you're going to create the output layer, how do you what activation function you use. So the concept is going to be the same, right? So what for this particular set of data, I'm going to take an example of a finance data. Okay, the concept is same. Only thing, I'll use a finance data and I will show you how I execute using neural networks. How do I calculate the error rate or how do I calculate the accuracy? So here in this case, earlier in base, I had used something called the Jupyter Notebook. And typically, guys, if you are really want to try this out, you need to install Anaconda Navigator. Anaconda Navigator is an open source which is available. If you install that, you will get both Jupyter Notebook as well as Python Spider. There is another interactive development tool which I'm going to show you now and execute a particular financial model. Okay. So this is my Python Spider. Let me bring this down for now. This is my Python Spider. Okay. Now I've got a data set. Now what is my data set is, okay, what is the data set is, I just go through my files. This is my data set. It's an Excel file. And this Excel file has got various parameters. So this is a case of a bank, and a bank has got some data about a customer. I mean, this is a classification data. Okay, I'm only focusing on classification, where the output says that whether he is going to leave the bank or he is going to whether he is going to likely to leave a bank or is not going to leave the bank. And I, as a banker, need to ensure that the customer is retained, right? So I capture various parameters, right? The customer ID, the surname, the credit score, the geography, the gender, the age and tenure, and so on. These are the various parameters. And I mean, you can always correlate to a healthcare where you have these various features, and the output could be 0 or 1, whether he's going to exit or going to have a cancer or doesn't have a cancer, or whether he is going to exit the bank or not exit the bank. Okay, so this becomes my dependent variable and all others become my independent variable, right? Now, since I have this data now, I need to come out with a model where I will use neural networks to find out the accuracy of neural networks for this particular set of data. So what I'm going to do first, I will import the various libraries. Okay, I will import my data set. Just guys who are not technical, don't worry about it. I'm just trying to show you what I'm doing. So I'm seeing the data. Hello.
Sir, can you please zoom the screen? We're not able to get it properly.
Can you see now?
Yes, zoom it. Yes. Okay, fine, sir. Now.
Is that okay? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, okay.
So I have imported my data set. I imported my libraries. I imported my data set. Now, if I go to my data set, I can go here and This is my data set. Let me just see. Okay. Kernel is dead. Okay. Let me do one thing. Let me just restart my spider. Just give me 1 minute. I'll just restart it again.
எத்தனை மணிக்கு 11 o'clock 11:30 இருக்கா
Okay, let is coming up. Okay, so let me start from the scratch. I'm importing my libraries. So this is my data set and this is my script. Okay. So ma'am, can you put this person on mute? Kalyani ma'am, can you please put the person on mute?
Sir, give me a minute. Question paper இப்ப கொடுக்க வேண்டிய வேலை இருக்கு ஆன்சர் கீ கரெக்ட் பண்ணுங்க சொல்ல வேண்டியதுல நிஜமாவே நீ முடிக்காம இருந்தீனா சொல்லவே மாட்டியா அப்புறம் அவ்வளவு வருத்தம் இல்லங்க ஏன்னா பிரிண்ட் அவுட் எடுத்து கொடு இல்லைன்னா இமெயில் லாகின் பண்ணி கொடு இந்த டாக்குமெண்ட் டவுன்லோட்.
Thank you, ma'am. So we will import the libraries. So let's do importing the libraries. Okay. Then I am going to import my data set. Oh, sorry, I'll have to change my folder. So I'll have to change my folder to College of Engineering Pune, Artificial Neural Networks, and I say select. Okay. I go my nn.py. Very good. Now I'll run it again. Fine. Now if I go to my variable explorer, this is my data set, right? Okay, this is my data. So this is my row number, customer ID, surname, credit score of the person, where he belongs, male, female, what is the age, how long he has been with the bank, what is the balance in his account, how many products he's using, whether he has got a credit card or not. So all these parameters, what is estimated salary, and then whether he's going to exit, that is 1, or he's not going to exit the bank, which is 0. This is my data set. Okay. Now, in this case, if you see my data set, my row number, my customer ID, and surname has no meaning for my analysis. So when I decide which are my independent variables I'm going to take for analysis, at this point I decide that which other variables are important for my analysis. So customer ID is anyway going to be different, so it doesn't make any sense for analysis. His surname doesn't make sense, and his row numbers again does not make sense. So I'm omitting the first 3 rows, and I'm defining which is my independent variable. If I go to my independent variable here, it has got all the rows except those first 3 columns, and I've also I've excluded the target variable, which is 0 and 1, because that's going to be my dependent variable. So I select my dependent variable. It is 0 and 1. Okay. Now what I'm doing, now there is one important thing which I'm not sure you have guys you have gone through this. If you see my data set, right? Now this data set, there are a lot of text. You got geography, you got female. These are the 2 ones. Now, in the case of machine learning does not understand text. They only understand numbers, algorithms. So you need to convert this text into numbers, and the way to do it is something called data categorization. And there are some libraries in Python called the label encoder and one-hot encoder, which converts these text values to an array of numeric variables. So I'm not going to get into all that now, okay, but I'm just telling you the significance of this data categorization is to convert any text values to numbers. So in this case, I'll have to convert my geography into numbers. I have to convert the gender also to my numbers. Okay. So typically gender, I make it 0 and 1 because it could have only 2 values, male and female. And geography, I will create an array depending on the number of countries. Okay. So I am using this here to do this function. Okay. Now, if I see the value of x, now if you see that my everything has become numeric. There is nothing like male, female. There is nothing like France, Germany, and so on. They're all converted to numbers. Okay. Now what I'm doing, I'm splitting my data into training set and test set. So how many records I have? I've got 10,000. So 20% is test set, that is 2,000, and 8,000 is training set. So if I see here, X train is 8,000, 12 columns, 12 records, 12 columns, 8,000 records, and Y test is 2,000, Y is 10,000, and again there's only one output, so that's why comma is, you don't have to explicitly put 1 there. Okay, 2,000 comma is good enough. Now there's another thing called standard scalar functions. Okay, that is again as part of a data preprocessing step. Whenever you have data in different scales, you need to tune it down to a common scale, because that will allow you to compare the 2 variables. Suppose I have got age, which is 21 to 60, and salary between 10,000 and 1 crore. If I have to draw this in a graph, it will be very difficult because they are in different scales. So using some functions called the scale functions in Python, you can reduce these values to a very common scale so that it is easy for the machine learning algorithm to compare or to do a graphical analysis between these 2 variables. And this process is called feature scaling. Okay. And the function that we are using today is called the standard scalar function, which typically is used to convert these high values to a common scale. Now, if you see here, if I go to Xtrain, sorry, x underscore train. Okay, you see the values. The salary is 16,000, 57,000. My age could be 42, 45, and so on. So I will use the standard scalar function, and if I see the value of x train now, the value has become very small, and this is done using the standard scalar function. So you're bringing the values to a common base scale, right? Then after you do this, now comes the actual ANN function. So we use something called the Keras. It's a library from Google, which sits on TensorFlow. So I'm going to export this. Ma'am, I had time till 11:50. No, I can take, right? Kalani ma'am?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, now I have done this. Now I am going to use this to initialize my ANN. Now what I will see here, what I'm doing. First I'm doing is I'm defining my first hidden layer. So hidden layer, I'm saying use 6 neurons. I use my activation function as rectifier, ReLU, rectifier unifier. And then I use input dimensions. This is my input layers. That is, there are 12 dimensions. So this is called rectifier linear unit, and this is the input dimension. So I'm going to use this to create the first hidden layer. Then I now create the second hidden layer. In the second hidden layer, again, okay, now one thing I want to tell you here. Okay, so let's come here. Classifier equal to this. Again, I take 6 neurons. Again, I use activation function ReLU, and I create my second hidden layer. So I've got input layer, there are 12 variables. I've got hidden layer 1. Now I've got hidden layer 2. Okay. Then now I define my output layer. So I'm using one neuron activation sigmoid because it is binary value 0 and 1. I don't have to use threshold or softmax. I can use sigmoid. So I use this. So I have now designed my now here. That's where when you do the part of the design, right? So you have to really decide how many neurons you're going to take, how many of hidden layers you need to take, and how many epochs you're going to use, right? So these are all you have to do a lot of trial and error and look out the optimized model. And this again comes to a lot of experience, right? And what I'm going to do, I'm going to compile my this, and basically my model will calculate my accuracy. Here I'm using my training set. I'm training the model with the training set. Batch size equal to 10. That means I will, out of 8,000 records, I will take 10. There are 10 batches, right? So I will take 800 records at a time. So there are batch sizes 10. So 10 batch sizes, right? So I will take 800 records, okay, 10 times to make it 8,000. That will complete one epoch. Okay, and I'm using epochs 100. Now see what is happening. It is going through epoch 1, epoch 2. Now it is calculating the accuracy. See, the accuracy tends to increase. 83%. I think I will take out my video. I think you guys have seen me enough. Okay. So it is running epochs 100 times.